Well, it's that time again. Hello everyone, Britton here, also known as Some Okie Dude, and today I'm back with another wrap-up, what I read this last month. You know how it is. The Spoopathon is in full swing, and you know what that means. I have to talk about the books that I read last month, and I'm going to be doing that. It was actually a very productive month. Last couple of months have been kind of slumpish months, and September was finally when I felt like I was getting my groove back, so yeah, there were a couple books read, a couple of comics as well, and I will be talking about them today. First book I want to talk about for today is one that is special for me because it's a book that takes place in my home state, and that is Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. This is my first David Grann book, and I read this after, I had to pester my aunt in order to get it back to me, but, that's all fine and dandy. But I ended up reading this, and I really enjoyed it. It was a really well-written book. It's kind of like In Cold Blood, if you've ever read that book from Truman Capote, except it's not as much of a novel. It's still a nonfiction, this is what happened. But Grann does use a lot of narrative devices in this story, and the story that is told in here was very, very sad. It was very heart-wrenching at points. I blew through this in about 3 days. It was a very quick read. It's a very harrowing read. It's a very sorrowful read. It's about a scar on the nation that we should be, which is the nation of the free, the home and the brave, all that good stuff. And Killers of the Flower Moon shows America at its very worst, or at least some of its very worst. But there were a lot of really great characters in this story, and I say characters for lack of a better word. A lot of them were real people. I also read this because the Martin Scorsese film adaptation of this book is coming out soon, and, it took place in my home state. It was even filmed in my home state. I just had to pick up and read this, and I was not disappointed. This was a really good book. I thought, I do want to read more David Grann in the future. I definitely hope to read more of his work, and this was a really good place to start. I really enjoyed Killers of the Flower Moon. Excellent stuff. Next book I'm going to be talking about here is a fantasy novel. It's kind of my comeback to fantasy, I guess, and it's one that I had a lot of people telling me to read, and that was Beyond Redemption by Michael R. Fletcher. I even became acquainted with the author of this book, and he's a pretty cool guy. I also had a conversation with my friends Dan and Pem from Black and Blue Collar Reader and Epic Tales, respectively, and we talked about Beyond Redemption. I'll link the video down below if you want to see us talk about it. I thought this was a really good book. One of the most visceral fantasy novels I have read in a while, maybe since Black Leopard, Red Wolf. And even then, Black Leopard, Red Wolf was not as vile and it wasn't as vile and committed to obscenity and evil, to borrow a phrase from Tim O'Brien. This book was really messed up, but I also really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good novel. There's a lot of great black humor in it, and the characters, while I wouldn't call them likable necessarily, definitely had their spots where they felt human. And they were really well done. I thought it was really well done stuff. Also really loved the cover art from Richard Anderson, the great Richard Anderson. I can definitely see why people enjoyed this book. It's vile, it's nasty. I can definitely see people being turned off from this book. But I can also see how people would like this book. It's very much a dark book, and I really loved the idea that it had about magic, that basically magic in this world is based on how crazy you are, how mentally your delusions take over, how delusional you are, it makes you more powerful. Again, we discussed this in the video that I already did about this book. But yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it. There were some parts that really just, I'm a hygiene fanatic, okay? And if you're a big hygiene fanatic like me, you'll wince many times to this book because my God, I wanted to take a shower after finishing, after finishing that book. Oh my God, it's like reading a McCarthy novel. Speaking of that, the next book I'm covering is a book that took like 2 months for me to finish, and that was the Cormac McCarthy Sutri. Finally, yes, I got around to Sutri, and I liked it. I'll put it that way. I'm not gonna, this is Cormac McCarthy. I have never read a thing from McCarthy that I disliked. I mean, maybe Child of God is the only book from him that I really didn't care for. But even then, I found something to appreciate in that book. And this is not a bad book by any means, but it's definitely not a book for everybody. It's kind of a book where it's about the vibes, if that makes any sense. It's not really a plot-based book. There's a lot, it's more about the vibe and the atmosphere that McCarthy's looking for. But I like this book. I mean, there's some great stuff in here. The atmosphere in this is fantastic. Of course, I mean, I might say that this is probably McCarthy's best work as a prose stylist. If I could say his best work in general, still Blood Meridian. I don't think that's changing anytime soon. But Sutri was probably his best in terms of prose. The prose in this is just, oh man, and it's about and McCarthy really loves that theme about the really smart guy hanging out with just the dregs and just disgusting, most depraved members of society. There's also some really hilarious bits in this book. Now I know McCarthy is not well known for his humor, though if you've read All the Pretty Horses, you know he could do it. But there's some bits in here that really made me laugh, and it's also really sorrowful at points. It almost feels like I remember reading somewhere somebody saying it was a goodbye to a certain part of his life, and it definitely feels like that. It has that. It feels like a lament in some ways. It's not really a. It's sad, but it's also funny. There's also some dark stuff in there. There's this character called Harrogate he's hilarious. He's just poor guy. He's just always getting into all sorts of trouble. It's kind of hard to describe Sutri in a few sentences, but I liked most of it. There were some parts that kind of dragged. It took a minute to get going. It's a very patient read. You kind of have to be patient with it. You have to kind of roll with it. It's not really like The Road or No Country where it's these very short, choppy sentences. It's very much like this very flowing, almost Jack Kerouac, where it feels like it's racing to the finish, if that makes sense at all. Also, Faulkner-esque. I've not read a lot of Faulkner. I've read some of the short stories that he's done. I know Carol from the Falcon Reads didn't really love this book, and I don't blame you if you don't like this book. I can see how it'll turn some people off. It's not really... McCarthy, I always put it this way, McCarthy is like here, and I'm like here. I'm like, here's like how I view storytelling, and then like he's like up here. He thought on another plane that I can't comprehend. At least not now in my life. Maybe if I get older, perhaps I will. But I read Sutri, and it was very good. Again, it was. I have not read a disappointing McCarthy book yet. Again, maybe except for Child of God, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, no, this was pretty good. It took a minute for me to finish it, but I finally did. This is probably his densest book to date. I mean, my God, it is not for the faint of heart. So I would not recommend this first. I'll put it that way. Don't read Sutri first. Read like No Country or The Road first. Don't read Sutri first. Last official book I have here is a first for me. Thomas Pynchon, Inherent Vice. Thank you, Jason, for providing me with this copy. This is another one I don't really know how to describe, to be all honest with you. I know Jason kind of gave up on it because, he's Jason. He does that. But I enjoyed this, but at the same time I was kind of again, it's kind of like Sutri. I feel like it's about the vibes more than it is about like a story. Like there is a story in there, but it's more about like this weird hippie Hunter S. Thompson, Big Lebowski, except times 10. This book is way more. This book is way more druggy than. It's like if Hunter S. Thompson did the Big Lebowski. I'll put it that way. That's kind of a good way I describe it. But I really like this. I did like it, though. I mean, I like the characters. I really love Pynchon's voice as an author. He's very playful. I had a friend of mine compare him to Vonnegut, and I don't think that's a bad comparison. And I've heard this is his most accessible. There were some points that kind of threw me off. Like, he likes to go in these, like, weird side tangents. And I hear he just does that in all of his work. So I guess I'll have to I'll have to get used to it before I get to his other books. But, yeah, this was a really interesting book. It's a unique take on the noir story. And to be honest, and I know Jason said this, and I actually agree with him on this, it almost feels like Pynchon is just kind of having fun with the genre. It's not really a big, serious thing. And you can tell from the... You can just tell from the tongue-in-cheek tone that it's not supposed to be entirely serious. It's definitely a tongue-in-cheek story. And it's definitely a tongue-in-cheek book. There's a lot of really funny mental images that I got when reading this. There's one moment that I won't spoil, but it definitely left an impact on me. There's also a surprising amount of pathos in this. Like, there's some moments where it gets really emotional, and I just wasn't expecting it. I would probably say Killers of the Flower Moon is my favorite book of this month, but this book was interesting. I might have to read it again at some point. I don't know if I was in the proper headspace. It's rather appropriate for my summer read-along, summer read-a-thon, I mean to say, because this definitely has that summer vibe. But, yeah, Inherent Vice. I read one comic this month, and that was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. It's been a while since I got back into the comics, and the comic I read was Middle West by Scotty Young and Jorge Corona. Probably butchered that. I apologize if he ever watches this, which is probably never. But I read Middle West, and I remember... let me give some backstory. I actually read the first issue of this story a long time ago, a few years back, and I was intrigued. I was really taken aback by it. I thought, man, this is really good. And I finally read this full volume. I liked it. I thought it was really good. It has that Bradbury-esque, whimsy, but there's also there's this darkness in within, It definitely feels like something Ray Bradbury would have written, and I do not say that lightly. I mean, I know Scotty Young is kind of the goofy guy who did I Hate Fairyland, and I've never read that comic. It's never really appealed to me, but I might read it after reading this, because Middle West, this first volume anyway, was fantastic. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, it's just I want to read more of this. I'll put it that way. I love the unique setting. It's almost like a steampunk Middle West of America. It's basically, again, that's why I say that Bradbury-esque, because it has that same kind of something wicked this way comes kind of atmosphere, where it's almost like you're in a familiar place, but there's it's almost like an alternate take on Middle Western America. And it's really interesting, and the art in this is not generally what my style would be, but it's not bad. It's pretty good, actually. I need to hold on here. It's not generally what I would enjoy, but I thought it fit for this series. And there's a lot of, and the characterization is very strong too. It's just a good series so far. Very strong start. I do hope to continue with this series. I mean, it's and it's very it's nostalgic. I think that's a good way to describe it. Yeah, I recommend this comic. I think it's really good. I know it's 4 volumes, so if anyone is allergic to serialized storytelling, it's not very long. I'm looking forward to reading more of this. I think that Scotty Young and Jorge Corona have a good thing going here. But yeah, Middle West, it looks really cool, or it was really good, and it's definitely. I'll just put it this way: I liked it, and I enjoyed it, and I do want to read more, and it definitely, is a unique book for anyone who's interested in comics. I mean, it's not Saga, but literally nothing is Saga. But it is very much a very good read, so read it. It's really good. So, yeah, it seems that is really it. The Spoopathon is on. I've already completed a book. It was a reread, but, still. And I'm going to be reading horror throughout the whole month. I'm going to be doing horror stuff, covering horror stuff. I'm going to be having some conversations. I'm going to have Colin from Colin's Corner on here. We're going to discuss it. That's going to be next week. Also going to be discussing Those Across the River with my friend Jason, which is how we first met. Was reading that book. And reading, I'm also just going to be doing some other conversations. I'm going to have my friend Curtis, the author Curtis M. Lawson, hopefully on. We're going to discuss his short story collection, Devil's Night, and I'm going to be covering a bunch of horror stuff throughout the month. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. Halloween is one of my favorite times of the year. And I love Halloween a lot. And I already did the books I hope to cover, books and comics I hope to cover for Spoopathon, so I'll link that down below as well, but give it a shot. Check that out. But I think that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can check me out on Twitter. You can find me on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. And find me on Discord, because I would really like to hear from you guys. I would really like to hear from you guys. So, yeah, that's kind of it. So, I'll see you next time.